More preserved dinosaur remains, spectacular finds on Pluto confirm a young universe, and a stuffed mailbag. This is Genesis Week. And a welcome to this episode of Genesis Week, the weekly program of creationary commentary on news, views, and events pertaining to the origins controversy, made possible by you, the supporters of Core Ottawa, Citizens for Origins Research and Education. Excellence in pirate broadcasting, airing right across Canada on the Miracle Channel, all over the world via Roku on the Genesis Science Network, and of course on the Christianity Network on YouTube. God did not say, be transformed by the removal of your mind, but rather we here at Genesis Week believe your brain was intelligently designed and given to you for a reason. Remember, if you get lost in cyberspace, you can find us at genesisweek.com, where you can get Crevo rants, full interviews with our guests, and even subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm your host, Ian Juby. Almost as if in response to last week's show, University of Alaska at Fairbanks reported finding a new species of hadrosaurid dinosaur. While they claim it is a new species of dinosaur, I'll leave off that debate for another day. It is a fantastic find to be sure, but for multiple other reasons. The first being just where this fossil was found. It was excavated from the north slope of Alaska, a place where you would hardly expect to find lizards living, let alone giant lizards. This is interesting because we do find so much tropical or equatorial life buried and fossilized in the high Arctic and Antarctic, suggesting one of two things. Either the poles were tropical in the past, or some major catastrophic event transported tropical life to the poles. Now, while I could suggest that a worldwide flood could explain some of the tropical life we find at the poles, such as the fossilized corals or the preserved trees at Axel Heiberg Island, there are other discoveries such as the woolly mammoths, which, contrary to their popular image, are not at all suited for Arctic conditions. Yet, they're found buried standing up. Multiple authors have described the Siberian fossil record of mammals as so diverse, only the Serengeti of Africa matches the diversity. Now, why would they say that? Because in the Arctic, we find the fossil and frozen remains of mammoths and mastodons, horses, rhinoceros, lions, leopards, bear, tigers, reindeer, giant beavers, musk sheep, musk ox, donkeys, camels, and a whole whack of other animals that do not live in the Arctic today. The woolly mammoths of Siberia, while called fossils, were not fossilized but rather frozen, preserved. And not just them, but most of the animals I listed. Back in episode 28 of season 2 of Genesis Week, we discussed the discovery of camels in the high Arctic, which, while fossilized, still had preserved original biomaterials, such as collagen fibers. So the frozen fauna would appear to have been buried and frozen in place, not transported by, say, a global flood. The hadrosaurs were found in layers most creationary scientists would say were flood layers. That is, layers of sediments that were deposited by the global flood of Noah's day. Yet the researchers described the bones as frozen, not fossilized. Longtime viewers will recall that account by researchers from Ancestry Genesis who flew up to Alaska, responding to reports of dinosaur bones which were found there. Yes, this was the same deposit on which this hadrosaur was found. The bones were originally misidentified for years because they were thought to be bison bones. Why? Because they weren't fossilized. So last week's show focused on an entire special edition of the Creation Research Society Quarterly Journal dedicated to analyzing preserved original biomaterials in the fossil record, and dinosaurs in particular. Now, obviously, these hadrosaur bones have biomaterials. They aren't even permineralized, what we loosely call fossilized, though the bones are considered fossils due to their assumed great age. So this new hadrosaur is just another of the myriads of examples of preserved original biomaterials found in the fossil record. Alleged to be 70 million years old, if there's original preserved biomaterials, that means it'll have original carbon in it, which means it could be carbon dated. I'd encourage the researchers to run the bones through carbon-14 tests, and I'll make a prediction. There will be plenty of carbon-14 found still in the bones, showing conclusively the bones cannot possibly be any older than 100,000 years old. In fact, the carbon-14 dates will probably return an age in the ballpark of 40,000 years old. The dinosaurs, contrary to public perception, do not cause any problems for the biblical account of a young Earth and a worldwide flood of Noah. In fact, the more and more you look into it, the more and more you see the dinosaurs affirming that the Earth is young, and that it was hit with a gigantic, watery catastrophe. I had a pile of people write in asking about the recent discoveries on Pluto, which was finally visited by the New Horizons spacecraft. First of all, congratulations to the New Horizons team. It has been a whirlwind of spectacular finds on the last of the planets in our solar system yet to be explored. Or at least the last of what was formerly called a planet, and some still call and argue that it's a planet. The researchers continuously described what they saw and measured with words such as mysterious, shocking, strange, unexpected, or blew our socks off. Now, pretty much everything they found was unexpected. What was it exactly they found? Now remember, they believe Pluto is 4.6 billion years old. Anything sitting out in space for that amount of time should have craters from impactors. Lots and lots of craters. The lack of craters means one of two things, both of which sharply refute an old age for Pluto. Either A, Pluto is young and thus hasn't been exposed to impactors, or B, geological processes are resurfacing Pluto and wiping out the craters. But if Pluto is 4.6 billion years old, the planet should be very old, very cold, and very dead, geologically speaking. Instead, what is seen is a dramatic lack of craters and the presence of a whole lot of active geological processes, processes upon which the researchers were able to put an upper age limit of 100 million years. Now that's the upper limit. As the researchers pointed out, there is no lower limit, as it could be geologically active right now. Even if the processes were 100 million years old, that's 46 times younger than Pluto was assumed to be. Further to this, the spacecraft was able to measure the loss of atmosphere from Pluto. Particles from the sun traveling through space strike things like atmospheres or solid objects and affect their movement. There has actually been proposals to try and harness this solar wind for space travel. Well, the solar wind is blowing Pluto's atmosphere away, removing an estimated 500 tons of nitrogen per hour and spreading it off into space. Well, now hold on a minute. One doesn't have to be educated at no college to start doing the math here. If you're removing Pluto's atmosphere at a rate of 5 railroad cars per hour by weight, can a little planet smaller than our moon still have an atmosphere after 4.6 billion years? Not a chance. In fact, some of the stuff blowing off Pluto appears to be landing on its moon, Charon. Charon was also full of surprises, including a reddish polar cap that was painted by debris being blown onto it from Pluto, either by solar wind or geysers on Pluto. Charon has no atmosphere, and thus it should have even more craters. Not only does it not have craters, but the geological activity on Charon is just as dramatic, even with canyons some 3 miles or 5 kilometers deep. Now, all of us, evolutionists, creationary scientists, are all in awe at the discoveries. But I just want to point out how the predictions of those who believe in deep time were thoroughly and utterly destroyed by falsification. Meanwhile, David Coppedge over at Creation Evolution Headlines went out on a limb and made a series of predictions based upon a recent created solar system. Coppedge's predictions have been systematically affirmed. Which model matches the evidence? A recent creation, by far and away. Well, if the Bible is right about that, and Jesus believed the account of a recent creation, then I wonder what else Jesus was right about. You can read more on Coppedge's website, and also Spike Psarris had a packed newsletter detailing the discoveries. Read more about them right here. All right, stick around. We'll be right back.
The Complete Creation video series is just that, an exhaustive look at the science, philosophy, and theology behind the creation-evolution debate. In this 12 DVD series, Ian Juby starts off with a 1-hour presentation for the children in God's little creation. He then follows up with almost 11 hours of lecturing for the adults as he walks you through the debate starting at its surprising history and examining the evidence from biology, geology, physics, paleontology, and archaeology. Chances are any question you have about the creation-evolution debate is answered in this video series. With open captions for the hearing impaired, the series is both entertaining and educational. There are also free resources, such as question and answer and proctor sheets for homeschoolers. You can now get the entire set as an instant digital download or on DVD. Visit Ian's bookstore today.
For me? Big Game Jim tweeted, "Hi, after Noah's flood, how did kangaroos only exist in Australia and get back to Australia? How did the flying squirrel get here? How did Pacific Islanders get on the islands? And how did polar bears and penguins get back to the Arctic?" Well, thanks for writing in. Big Game Jim's questions are, of course, all related to each other and are common questions. Related to this is the question of how did Noah get all of the animals from all over the world to the ark? For instance, if the ark was being built in the Middle East, how did he get animals from North America? Well, let's answer both of these questions. The idea of Pangaea, the supercontinent, was actually a biblical one. Antonio Snyder Pellegrini was reading his Bible where it says in Genesis, on day 3 of creation, that God gathered the waters together into one place. Pellegrini deduced that if the waters were all gathered into one place, then that means the land should have been in one place as well. The land is not in one place now, so the land must have broken up at some point, presumably during the global flood of Noah. Pellegrini then began to experiment with the fit of the continents to speculate on how they originally could have fit together. In 1858, some 50 years before scientists who believe in an old Earth hijacked the idea, applied millions of years to it, and claimed it as a refutation of the biblical timeline. So how did Noah gather the animals from all of the continents before the flood? Well, simple. There was no continents. It was all one landmass, what we would call Pangaea. Pangaea broke up at the time of Noah's flood into the present-day continents. So how then did the animals get from where the ark landed, in modern-day Turkey, to the other continents? When we look in the oceans, we find multiple mountains on the ocean floor called table mounts. Now these are mountains whose tops have been planed off by fast-moving water. Now some of these planed surfaces are as much as 5,000 feet or 1,500 meters below present-day sea level, indicating for a time at least the ocean levels were 1,500 meters lower than they are today. Now, if you lower the oceans by even 300 feet, you actually expose land bridges connecting all of the continents. You could literally walk from Turkey to Canada and South America. These land bridges only need to be exposed for a few years, as that is far more than enough time for animals and people to get anywhere. Think about it. It would be nothing for you and your family to travel 5 miles in a day. Taking 1 day a week off from traveling, well, that's 30 miles per week. In 1 year, you would have traveled 1,560 miles, or about 2,500 kilometers. Leaving Mount Ararat in Turkey, you could have traveled to Egypt, Yemen, Austria, or Finland in 1 year, at a very slow pace. In 16 years, you could go the entire way around the globe. The only place that doesn't have an obvious sunken land bridge is Australia. And even the evolutionists believe there was probably a land bridge connecting Australia to Asia. Some evolutionists also speculate that some animals could have rafted from continent to continent, with animals simply being rafted on floating logs during disasters, etc. Now, I agree this is a possibility, but there's an even better one. People building boats and crossing these narrows could have brought animals with them, either as pets or specifically to introduce animals to other parts of the world. Okay, I hope that helps, Big Game Jim. Blair Steven wrote in on YouTube. Hi Ian, welcome back. Hope you had a good summer. I really hope this is the season when you will actually attempt to define a kind for me. I am still looking for evidence that can't seem to be provided by your viewers or any other creationists. Also, if everything in native arts is real, what about two-headed serpents? Wouldn't that make it hard to poop? Just kidding. I know the two-headed serpents aren't real. It's only the ones you decide that look like dinosaurs that are real. And if you can't define kind as it related to genetics, there is no such thing as a theory of creation. You or your little group of followers has been able to provide one yet. It's going on a year now. It's getting a little embarrassing. Well, thanks for writing in. I hope you had a good summer too. Although I have answered your question about kinds multiple times, I will go over it again. I would go by the definition in Strong's Concordance, conveniently provided from the online Blue Letter Bible. Groups of living organisms belong in the same created kind if they have descended from the same ancestral gene pool. This does not preclude new species because this represents a partitioning of the original gene pool. Information is lost or conserved, not gained. A new species could arise when a population is isolated and inbreeding occurs. By this definition, a new species is not a new kind, but a further partitioning of an existing kind. But you've made a logical fallacy. If we cannot discuss kinds, because we don't have a set definition, then we can't discuss the origin of species, according to Darwinian evolution, because there is no set definition of species. There are multiple definitions of species, and every definition has exceptions. Interestingly, the term species was coined by a creationist, Carl Linnaeus, who invented the term species because he believed they were specially created. Interesting how Darwin hijacked a creationist ideology for his evolutionary worldview. Having a set definition is important, but having a definition or lack thereof cannot be used as proof for or against a theory or model. But then you comment regarding the interview with Vance Nelson, alleging that we've cherry-picked mythological creatures represented in ancient Indian artwork. Come on, Blair. You even demonstrated in your comment that you can tell a mythological creature from a real one. But let's test you a bit farther. Tell me now, is this a mythological creature? What about these creatures? Are they mythological? See, why would you not say these are mythological? Now, Vance will tell you why. And as he pointed out in his book and on this show, you need to compare the image to reality. If the image matches what we know from reality, and remember, that reality can include the fossil record, because we know those creatures really existed, then we can conclude it's not a mythological creature. As Vance put it, if it's a depiction of a half man, half elephant, and we know of no creature like that, either fossil or living, then we can conclude it's a mythological creature. It's pretty simple, really. There is ancient artwork from literally all over the world that depicts what are obviously dinosaurs in great detail. So obviously, dinosaurs and man coexisted even recently. Over the summer, I posted an article on the new Genesis Week website regarding an open letter penned to doctors Francis Collins and Kenneth Miller from John Leonard. Now, Leonard misunderstood several things regarding what Miller, who is a theistic evolutionist, had to say about what he deems evidence for evolution. Now, Miller kindly responded to the open letter and corrected Mr. Leonard's mistakes. But yet Miller wrote as if the evidence against his claims didn't even exist. Specifically, Miller brought up the alleged fusion of two ape chromosomes, which became one human chromosome in our ancestral history. Now, I pointed out in the article how Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins had already refuted Miller's claim because there was a gene that crosses over the alleged fusion site in the human chromosome, and that Miller even acknowledged this fact. This whole point of my article was asking why Miller seemed to ignore this fact in his response. Glenn W. on Twitter then called me to task on what I said, asking, "Can you show me where Miller admitted to the fusion gene being, quote, involved in dozens of critical life-sustaining processes, end quote. Thanks." I pointed out what Miller acknowledged was the fact that there was a gene that crossed over the fusion site in the chromosome, a fact he had previously denied in writing. Glenn then said that I needed to clarify this and asked what was my evidence that the gene, called DDX11L2, was a gene critical for life. Now, wait a minute. You've read the paper. You've seen the very long list of processes in which this gene is known to be involved. Excuse me, but no, you need to demonstrate that the gene is not crucial for life, seeing as how various important jobs the gene does have already been well documented. And may I remind you, this is what we know so far. DDX11L2 is classified as a pseudogene, but pseudogenes are defined as having no function. As Dr. Gene Leitner pointed out, this is an evolutionary argument just like the vestigial organs. This argument has been discredited 1,000 times over, as every single vestigial organ has been found to have function. It's the same with pseudogenes, which have now been found to have function. Sometimes even critical function, like coding for proteins. Now, as Dr. Leitner put it, a functional pseudogene is an oxymoron. As Dr. Tompkins pointed out, the DDX11L2 gene is directly linked to some 255 functions within the human body. You know, important stuff like blood cell production. You know, it's the functions we don't yet know about that's really exciting. But that's where you come in. Tell you what, the biotechnology to turn genes off is well established. Will you volunteer to have your DDX11L2 gene turned off? I'll pay for the procedure. Come on! This is science, man! Take it for the team! Think of the advancement for science you would contribute. We'll probably find out all kinds of life-giving processes that gene was involved in that we didn't even know about. Or, if you're chicken, maybe you could cite the study that shows that removing or nullifying the DDX11L2 gene has no effect. But this also brings up a question for evolutionists. If we could live without the gene, why has the gene become fixed within our genome? All right, I'm out of time. I'm your host, Ian Juby. Remember, you can send in your comments, questions, hate mail, and the keys to your newly renovated house in Las Vegas to us in a number of ways. You can email us at comment@genesisweek.com, or you can send us a tweet @GenesisWeek. Or you can drop by our new website, genesisweek.com, find the most recent show, and leave a comment there. Or you could drop us a line on our Facebook page at facebook.com/GenesisWeekTV. Remember those words of warning and comfort from our Creator, the Lord Jesus Christ, who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me." We'll see you next week.
We are a viewer-supported program and need your support to keep this program on the air. Please pray for us, and if you wish to financially support the program, Canadians can make a tax-deductible donation to Core Ottawa, Canada North Post Office Box 72075, Ottawa, Ontario, K2K 2P4. While we cannot offer tax-deductible receipts outside of Canada, donors wishing to financially support the program can do so online at ianjuby.org/donations, and thank you for your support.